Wait till he finds out about Celtiberians. My brother, I am 1/4 Celtiberian. In my last video, I think a lot of people were very confused why I didn't mention the Celtic migration and influence on the Iberian Peninsula. And that is only because the purpose of the last video was to show that the Visigoths did indeed exist in not only what is modern-day Spain, but also what is modern-day Portugal. But I would never want to do the injustice of overlooking the Celtiberians, so we're going to talk about them in this video. Typically, when people think of the Celts, they think of the Irish, the Scottish, and the Welsh. But modern-day Spain and Portugal have an entire Celtic history themselves. Beginning around 3000 BC, the Yamnaya steppe nomads began their descent from the Pontic-Caspian steppes into all of the regions of Europe. Around 2800 BC, we see the emergence of a group called the Bell Beaker culture. The Bell Beaker culture then began to make their way across Western Europe, where they would reach the Atlantic Ocean and sail their way into the Iberian Peninsula. This is evidenced by the fact that people in northern Iberia, and particularly northwestern Iberia, have the highest percentage of the R1b genetic haplogroup. This is the same haplogroup that comes from the Yamnaya steppe peoples. The predominance of Proto-Indo-European genetics is also likely due to the fact that the Iberians, who had indigenously inhabited the Iberian Peninsula, were mostly settled along the southeastern coast along the Mediterranean. The northern part of Iberia was much less populated because living conditions were a little bit rougher than they were on the Mediterranean coast. This is why when the Proto-Indo-European Bell Beaker peoples came into the Iberian Peninsula, they pretty much overwhelmed the small population of Iberians that were already currently living there and outcompeted them, genetically and linguistically. Then we fast forward to the Iron Age and we see another migration of a peoples called the Urnfield culture. These were Proto-Celts. And as many of you may know, but some of you may not, the Celts are also derived of the Proto-Indo-European steppe people. Finally, by the 7th century BC, the Celtic language was the predominant language spoken in the Iberian Peninsula, from the north all the way down to the southwestern kingdom of Tartessos. But the indigenous Iberians still pretty much held it down in the southeastern portion. They were obviously influenced, but like I said earlier, they have less than 50% Celtic patrilineage. But by the end of the 7th century, the Celtiberians were the predominant culture seen throughout the Iberian Peninsula. And they had a relatively strong and successful kingdom for hundreds of years until the Romans showed up. And that's kind of where my last video begins. Now it is worth noting and conceding the fact that Celtic influence is much stronger in Iberia than Visigothic influence. I was just trying to make a point in my last video about how the Visigothic element seems to have been the line of royal nobility that most kings liked to trace their ancestry to up until the Age of Exploration. That's the only reason I made the point that I was trying to make. But it is the Celtic peoples that had the greatest influence on the Iberian Peninsula from the Bronze Age through the Iron Age